Welcome to Mastering Enterprise Architecture, Strategies for Business and IT Alignment. Module 2, Enterprise Architecture Frameworks Explained. Hello and welcome back to EA, the lecture where we break down the world of enterprise architecture and hopefully make it a little less intimidating. I'm Sir Arsel, and today we're diving into the frameworks that really shape how organizations design and manage their IT systems. Now, if you've spent any time in enterprise IT, you've probably heard of TOGAF. First, let's talk about what makes TOGAF a cornerstone. It's, well, kind of the big one, isn't it? TOGAF stands for the Open Group Architecture Framework, and it's honestly one of the most widely adopted frameworks out there. Its whole purpose is to help organizations align their IT strategy with their business goals, and it does that by giving you a structured, almost modular approach to designing, planning, and governing your architecture. What makes TOGAF so powerful is its flexibility. It's modular, so you can tailor it to your organization's needs. But it's also rigorous enough to keep you on track. There are a few core components you'll hear about a lot. The Architecture Development Method, or ADM, which is really the heart of TOGAF. The Enterprise Continuum, which helps you organize and classify your architecture assets. The Architecture Content Framework, which is all about structuring your deliverables and artifacts, and the Resource Base, which is this treasure trove of templates, guidelines, and best practices. I remember my first real encounter with TOGAF. I was working on a project where the business and IT teams were, let's say, not exactly speaking the same language. We needed a way to bridge that gap, and TOGAF gave us a common vocabulary and a process to follow. Suddenly, we had a way to map out where we were, where we wanted to go, and how to get there, without everyone talking past each other. It wasn't magic, but it was a huge step forward. And that's what I think makes TOGAF a cornerstone in this field. It gives you structure, but it doesn't box you in. Next, let's discuss inside the TOGAF process, the Architecture Development Method. So, let's get into the nuts and bolts of TOGAF, specifically the ADM, the Architecture Development Method. This is where things get really interesting, at least if you're the kind of person who likes a good process. The ADM is iterative, which means you're not just doing things once and calling it a day. You're constantly refining, evolving, and adapting your architecture as your business changes. It's broken down into phases. You start with the vision, then move through business architecture, information systems architecture, technology architecture, migration planning, implementation governance, and finally, change management. Each phase has its own focus, For example, in the business architecture phase, you're analyzing business processes and structures to make sure your architecture actually supports your strategic goals. It's not just about drawing pretty diagrams. It's about identifying gaps between where you are and where you want to be. And then, as you move into the technical phases, you're building on that foundation. One thing I always stress is the importance of stakeholder involvement. The ADM really pushes you to engage both business and IT stakeholders at every step. That's how you make sure your architecture isn't just technically sound, but actually aligned with what the business needs. Documentation is a big part of this too. You're producing artifacts, things like process flows, data models, architecture definition documents, and storing them in the architecture repository. That way, you've got a clear record of decisions, models, and reusable building blocks. Now, you might be wondering, how does the ADM actually ensure alignment between technology and business goals? Well, it's that constant loop of stakeholder engagement, documentation, and iteration. You're always checking back. Does this solution still fit our business needs? Are we drifting off course? It's not foolproof, but it's a lot better than just hoping for the best. And honestly, having that structure in place makes it much easier to adapt when things inevitably change. Last but not the least, let's discuss comparing the giants. TOGAF versus Zachman and others. Now, TOGAF isn't the only game in town. There's another heavyweight you've probably heard of, the Zachman framework. This one's a bit different. It was developed by John Zachman back in the 1980s, and it's less about prescribing a process and more about giving you a way to organize and classify all your architectural artifacts. At its core, Zachman is a 6x6 matrix, 6 perspectives like planner, owner, designer, and so on, crossed with 6 fundamental questions: what, how, where, who, when, and why. That gives you 36 cells, each representing a unique view or artifact of the enterprise. The strength of Zachman is in its completeness. It makes sure you're not missing any critical perspectives or aspects. For example, you might use the owner's what cell to develop a conceptual data model, or the designer's how cell for detailed process models. It's a fantastic way to ensure you've got all your bases covered, especially when you're dealing with complex organizations. But here's the thing, Zachman doesn't tell you how to actually build or implement your architecture. It's a taxonomy, not a methodology. I've seen companies start with Zachman because they want that documentation completeness, but then realize they need something more practical for implementation. I remember one case where a company cataloged all their IT assets using Zachman, which gave them a brilliant overview, but when it came time to actually make changes and govern the process, they switched to TOGAF for its step-by-step guidance. Of course, there are other frameworks out there too. FEAF for example, is big in the U.S. government space, focusing on standardization and interoperability. Gartner's framework is more about business outcomes and practical governance, less prescriptive, more about delivering value quickly. Each has its strengths. TOGAF is great for structured processes and adaptability, Zachman for classification and completeness, FIAF for regulatory needs, and Gartner for business-driven agility. The reality is, most organizations end up blending elements from different frameworks to suit their needs. There's no one-size-fits-all. The key is understanding what each framework brings to the table and picking the right tool for the job. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for joining me as we unpacked the frameworks that shape enterprise architecture. Next time, we'll dig even deeper into how these frameworks play out in real-world scenarios. Until then, keep building, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one. Ta-ta for now. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss any of our future uploads. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover next, let me know. If you prefer more detailed info, you can grab a copy of Mastering Enterprise Architecture: Strategies for Business and IT Alignment.